Hi YouTube, Darth here. Field upgrades are one of those perks that a lot of players set and forget. You select a track of bonuses, get the first one for free, and hope for a squad good enough to unlock the rest. Myself, the only time I really change them out is when I'm playing as an engineer and I'm switching between blowing tanks up and blowing stuff up with tanks. Otherwise, I stick to very nearly the same field upgrades and perks all the time. Today I wanted to talk about why one of the most popular choices, the defensive field upgrade, sucks and what you should be considering instead. I'll talk about my favorites, what I think are the best, and I'll go over how popular these are in the wild. So first let's talk about the defensive field upgrade. It's probably not the worst idea in a Battlefield game, but for a long time it was the default choice for everybody in Battlefield 4 because it was overpowered. That's not a word I use very often, but when you could immediately confer a benefit to yourself that essentially turned your game into normal mode while everybody else remained in hardcore, I think that term is pretty accurate. Every weapon in Battlefield 4 took one more bullet to kill you at very nearly every distance. And you didn't have to do anything to get the benefit of armor, as it was the very first unlock. Now keep in mind I said that it was overpowered. After DICE LA took over development, one of the first changes they made was to increase the overall time to kill of almost every weapon in Battlefield 4. The effect of this was that the benefit conferred by the then overpowered defensive perk was given to everybody. So they took something that was overpowered and sucked and made it suck in a different way, because now it is very nearly useless. Which I'm actually okay with, because despite that, many people still run the defensive field upgrade. I'll get to how many people after I talk about why it's very nearly useless. So do you remember how good it was? I think a lot of people still think it is that good when it is definitely not. How pointless is the defensive field upgrade now? Well, let's take a look at some facts. Generally, for automatics, the defensive field upgrade changes the assault rifles, carbines, and LMGs bullets to kill from an increase at 40 to 50 meters to an increase at 30 to 40 meters. What does this mean? It means that the number of bullets required to kill an enemy increases by 1 about 10 meters earlier. So if all your engagements are in the 30 to 40 meter range, you are 1 bullet beefier, assuming they don't aim for your head. That might sound like a marginally good deal, but keep in mind that almost all of Battlefield 4 engagements occur under 35 meters. So for the most part, defensive field upgrade's armor perk does nothing for you. Against PDWs, the defensive field upgrade is similar, pushing the normal 1 bullet more to kill from 30 to 40 meters to 20 to 30 meters. Which is still pretty laughable, as most PDWs are at their most effective well inside that range. Aha, you say, what about hardcore? Well, as the defensive field upgrade affects bullet damage and not player health, the difference is negligible. In fact, there's even less of a reason to run a defensive field upgrade in hardcore than normal core, as the one-shot weapons remain one-shot. And that's really the only thing that the armor component of the defensive field upgrade accomplishes, completely neutering the slug round, bolt action, and bow. All three of these weapon types become essentially headshot only on normal when a player runs the defensive field upgrade. The only time you should be running the defensive field upgrade is if a slug, bolt action, or bow player is ruining your day at close range. Throw on a defensive field upgrade and they have to hit a headshot or they're pretty much toast. Shotgun buckshot is also slightly affected, but because of the number of pellets and damage output, the difference is negligible. You won't notice the difference except at long range where the pellets dissipate. I'll link my more in-depth video about shotguns at the end of this video. But for now, know that the differences in slug, bolt action, and bow performance are the primary reasons why you'd ever want to run defensive. But let's talk about who is using defensive. I ran some numbers to find out how popular the various field upgrade tracks are. Despite the fact that the defensive field upgrade armor is really only effective against less than a tenth of the weapon choices, it still puts up really high numbers. First, let's look at the popularity of various choices among 50 randomly selected assault players. You can see that the defensive field upgrade is pretty popular among randomly selected assaults. However, I thought to myself, what about just top tier experienced players? So I pulled 50 different, randomly selected level 140 assault players. The difference is pretty apparent. Most assault players seem to figure out that the defensive field upgrade is not very useful. Before we look at the rest of the classes, I want to start talking about some of the options here that an assault player could be choosing from and why the offensive field upgrade becomes the most popular. So in all three classes, there are 3 starting choices with the offensive, defensive, and shadow field upgrades. Each class also gets 2 of its own tracks. Offensive gives a player a fast sprint up front, an additional magazine of ammo, 1 extra grenade, and reduced fall damage. Not a bad pick for any class, really, particularly if you expect to go on kill streaks and need to move around a lot. Something that is, unsurprisingly, quite popular with assault players. Defensive confers armor, cover against suppression, explosive protection, and more immediate out-of-combat health regeneration. Armor is what most people talk about, including myself, when they talk about the defensive field upgrade. Although the in-game text mentions that it decreases chest damage by 10%, it's actually only a decrease of 7%. 50% less suppression is not bad, but it's also not great as it wears off relatively quickly anyways. Flak is useful against claymore campers, and quick regen doesn't matter much if you're running as assault, as you have easy access to health. It's also totally pointless in hardcore or classic if you don't ever regen automatically. Shadow has some benefits, but not many. The quick unspot will drop your spotted time from 8 seconds to 6 seconds. Sprint is the same as in the offensive track, increasing your movement speed by 10%. Reduced fall also makes an appearance, and finally the stealth perk allows the player to disappear from the minimap sensing technology when not sprinting, which is extremely situational. If I only had to choose between these three, I think offensive is the pretty clear winner, so keep that in mind as we press forward. As I said earlier, each class also has two specialty field upgrade tracks. For Assault, that's the Combat Medic and Grenadier field upgrades. The Combat Medic, my personal favorite for the Assault class, allows a player to throw out additional medkits, gives a faster sprint, and what I think is the most important, cuts the time to fully charge the defibrillator by half. That bit really adds a lot of oomph to squad play and vastly reduces the amount of time required to even throw out mediocre revives. The final perk in the Combat Medic track, Medical Unit, is pretty well useless unless infantry are essentially humping the vehicle. I'm not sure the exact radius of effect for healing while in a vehicle, but it's comedically small. Now the Grenadier field upgrade is primarily targeted at people who want to lob a lot of explosives. And this was more popular when the RGO impact grenade was essentially a one-shot kill. Still, the ability to lob 2 grenades out of the gates, plus sprint, plus more 40mm underslung grenades, and decreased damage from explosives has some use, although it's not very popular. But for the Assault, I really recommend either running my first choice of the Combat Medic field upgrade, or my second, the Offensive field upgrade. Now let's look at some numbers for the Engineers. Unsurprisingly, Defensive is quite popular with a random selection of players as it includes more low-level players. However, it quickly fades in favor of the two Engineer class-specific field upgrades, the Anti-Tank and Mechanic tracks. The Anti-Tank field upgrade is a no-brainer if you're out to crush some armor. You get more mines up front, but strangely enough you can't really use them until you get the third perk in the field upgrade track that actually lets you place those mines. What most people seem to be interested in is the additional 2 rockets that the anti-tank field upgrade provides, taking you from 5 maximum to 7, so you go from being able to kill 1 vehicle safely to as many as 3. The mechanic field upgrade has a bevy of nice perks. It's easily the best for any vehicle user, as the very first perk is an upgrade to repair speed. And you'll definitely want this, even as a secondary gunner, as it allows you to repair through almost all the singular damage sources in the game. Flak and cover just happen to be additional perks, and the repair unit is again hilariously tiny in its effective radius. Essentially you have to be touching the other vehicle to repair it. And 2 vehicles that close to each other is pretty much the dream of any C4 wielding support. So for the Engineer class, I usually pick Anti-Tank or Mechanic. Specifically, if I'm in a tank, I will pick Mechanic, and if I'm trying to blow up a tank, I will pick Anti-Tank, obviously. Next in line is the Support class, and the number of players using the Defensive field upgrade are the highest of the classes I've talked about so far. Probably because Support has some of the dumbest field upgrades in the game. Did you know that 3 of the 5 Support field upgrade tracks have an added magazine of ammo as a perk? Let that sink in. Now with that in mind, the 2 support-specific tracks are Indirect Fire and Perimeter Defense. Indirect Fire lets the player throw an additional ammo bag, they get an additional magazine of ammo, and wait up. Those 2 perks don't make any sense next to each other. The first, you need to actually be running bags, and the second assumes like you couldn't just drop one and wait a whole second. That makes no sense. Moving along in the Indirect Fire track, the Indirect Fire perk gives additional ammo to the XM25 and mortar, and the resupply unit is also borderline useless. Despite this track having very questionable utility, it's still used by almost a third of level 140 support players, making it the most popular. Perimeter Defense has some more utility, particularly if you're throwing claymores. Perimeter Defense gives you an extra magazine of ammo as its first perk. I mean, come on. Why are these magazine granting perks even in the support class? Dice. please. Next is added suppression, which comes in handy if you can't aim and inflicts your would-be target with an additional suppression effect. And now, the only thing you actually care about with this track, getting 3 claymores instead of 1. It's like they had a single idea for perimeter defense and filled around it. Finally, perimeter defense gets rounded out by an upgrade to the MP APS, increasing its uptime. Now, the MP APS might have actually been useful if every vehicle didn't already have their own, and if it deflected lobbed grenades. As it stands, the support class has some of the weakest synergy of choices in the game for its field upgrades. Personally, I'd probably pick either offensive for the sprint or perimeter defense for the increased suppression and claymores. Finally, let's talk about Recon. Looking at the numbers again, a large number of Recons run with the defensive field upgrade. This decreases by the time those players grow up big and strong, and Recon probably has one of the most even balances of upgrades among the classes. And that's reflective of some actual good trade-offs that have to be made. The 2 Recon-specific field upgrades are Spec Ops and Sniper. The Spec Ops track is probably going to be more popular with run-and-gun Recons as it provides a lot of lethality upgrades. The Shadow perk, which is obtained immediately, makes the Recon immune to minimap spotting technology when not sprinting. Next is C4 explosives, and as Recon, having 6 instead of 3 is a pretty big boon. In the third spot is the motion sensor upgrade, which not only increases the number of motion sensors that can be used, but also hugely increases the range of tugs and map sensors. This is extremely useful on normal and completely useless on hardcore. Finally, the quick unspot is a nice icing on the cake, removing the Recon from the map 2 seconds sooner than the usual 8. Next, the Sniper Field Upgrade track is an effective choice for Recons actually operating at range with bolt actions. It allows a Recon to hold their breath longer on shots, receive less suppression, remove the 3D spot from themselves faster, and to keep enemies spotted for longer. This is almost everything you could wish for as a long-range bolt-action rifle user, except perhaps for a tent and a latrine. Now, which would I choose for my Recon? It should be telling that this class has the most even split among 140s because there are actually a number of good choices. Offensive and Spec Ops are the best choices for aggressive Recons. Spec Ops particularly if you're trying to defend a specific point with sensors in either Rush or Conquest. Sniper is good for bolt action users, and this is the only class where defensive could actually come into play on a regular basis. Specifically on normal, it makes even close range bolt action body shots a 2-shot kill instead of a 1-shot kill. So if you're in a somewhat close-range sniper duel, this will actually help you survive more encounters. But that's my rundown of all the classes and their field upgrades. I hope I've made it abundantly clear to those of you running the defensive field upgrade why it is nigh useless outside of very specific circumstances. There are a lot of other choices out there, please be sure to use any of them. If you've got a topic you'd like me to talk about in a future Battlefield-related video, please be sure to mention it in the comments below. I'm always looking for some general topics to talk about, and I found this one to be particularly fascinating after someone suggested it on another video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.